So along the demand curve, there's quantity, there's price, there's the demand curve. Income is supposed to be constant. If it's a true demand curve, namely ceteris paribus, everything else is constant, including income. And if income changes, as the price of this changes, like in the potato case with Ireland, where potatoes was such a big part of their diet, and the price of potatoes moved up and down, and that heavily impacted income. Well, what you're supposed to do is shift the demand curve. You're not supposed to move along a demand curve. So the Giffen good is nonsense. The Giffen good is beloved of the mainstream economists, and the Giffen good comes out of this sort of thing where the income effect is bigger than the substitution effect, that sort of thing. So you see, a lot of times you might think, well, you know, UTILs, big deal. But UTILs have important implications for antitrust. And you might think, well, indifference is really unimportant, but it has implications for the demand curve. And the demand curve is very important. Because one of the big fights in the minimum wage fight is, are demand curves downward sloping or not? And these cretins, you know, in every other way, they'll admit that if the price of peas rises, we'll have fewer peas. If the price of shoes falls, we'll have more shoes. When they want to get rid of, abortions, those abortion clinics, the states in the South, what they do is they raise the criteria up through the roof. You know, you have to have hospital attachments and all sorts of things in order to get rid of them. Well, that's what the minimum wage law is. Look, if the minimum wage law was so good, as Tom Woods said the other night, the first night here, why have foreign aid? Just tell Bangladesh to raise your minimum wage. Why have it at 15? Why be so niggardly? 15 is cheapskatey. Why not make it 50 or 500? We'll all be rich. We can all make 500 an hour. I mean, the poverty, you know, with the stroke of President Hillary's pen, we can all be fabulously rich, but she's only doing it for 15. What's the matter with her? She's against the poor. Right? If I'm elected, I'll raise it to 5,000 an hour. I'm kidding. Okay, what else do we have here? Externalities. That's another biggie. The mainstream loves externalities. And what's going on with externalities? What we have here, education is the usual example that they use. And this is the quantity of education. And this is the price of education. And there's the demand curve. And there's the supply curve. And this is the actual amount, quantity actual. That's the amount that will be bought in equilibrium, and that's reasonable. Here's, remember I drew the, the Venn diagram. That would be part of where we agree. So far so good. But then what Milton Friedman and the other people other free enterprises who hate the market, what they say is this demand curve is only private benefits. And there are spillover benefits or neighborhood effect benefits or positive externalities or external economy benefits. Namely, if you're educated, you're less likely to be a criminal. You're more likely to vote more intelligently. You're more likely to be a good neighbor. This young lady is shaking her head. I'll get to that part in a second, but I agree with you. It's all nonsense, but I'm trying to present the case the way it's presented in the textbooks. And what they say is when with demand curves, you add up demand curves. This is demand curve A and that's demand curve B. Then this would be the sum of the demand curves, right? You add them up. So what they're saying is this is private, but then there are also public benefits, and let's say the public benefits are here, so that when you get the sum of the demand curve, you add this one and that one, and you get that one. Everyone with me? Namely, if we took the total demand, namely all the benefits of education, not only the internal ones that, I'll get a better job, I'll get a better spouse, I'll learn stuff, it'll edify me, whatever, but also the spillover benefits. By me being educated, I'll help you guys, and you guys aren't paying me, and yet I'm benefiting you, you dirty rats. You ought to, have some respect. So anyway, we now have a total demand curve, and this is the quantity, call it ideal. Namely, that's how much education we should have. if we took into account the external effects. And what are we going to do? Well, Friedman is going to have his voucher system, or we'll subsidize education. Somehow we got to push us in that direction. And this is a market failure because the market only takes into account selfish, personal, individual benefits. We don't take into account the fact that we're helping other people. There's no charity. I'm kidding here. I'm trying to refute the thing. Obviously, we do take into account other people, or to put it in neoclassical terms, other people's utility enters our utility function. We are made better off when other people are made better off, especially if we like them, family members, kids, parents, whatever, friends. Okay, so that's the argument. What's the refutation? Why is this wrong? Well, you know, look, right now I'm smiling at you. See, teeth, smiling. And by the way, I take a shower once a month whether I need it or not. You people owe me. Hey, give me some money because I just smiled at you. Right? Or give me some money because I took a shower a month ago. I mean, what kind of an argument is that? Just because I benefit you, I can charge you? And that's the logic of this, that I'm entitled to tax you so that I'll have more education because I'm benefiting you. That's crazy. I mean, if we apply this, I'm a big fan of reductio's ad absurdum. And a reductio ad absurdum is if every time you benefit someone else, you can charge them. Well, every time a woman wears a miniskirt, she should be able to charge everyone because all the guys, their eyes are bugging out. And we should pay for her miniskirt. And, you know, this is nonsense on wheels or nonsense on stilts. That's the word I was looking for. Not on steroids, on stilts. This is nonsense. Okay, so that's one refutation. Another refutation is, where did Bernie Sanders get all of his buddies for the minimum wage? I'll tell you where. The People's Republic of Ann Arbor, the People's Republic of Cambridge, Mass., the People's Republic of San Francisco. And what's true in all these places? Lots of universities. And what do they learn at universities? Most of them don't take economics. They take sociology, or feminist studies, or queer studies, or God knows what studies, black studies. And what they teach them is Marxism. So really what we have is a case of external diseconomies. What we ought to do is tax education, because we've got too much of it. We should move this direction. Too much education. So there are problems here. When am I supposed to go, from 11 to 11:45 or? Oh, so I'm finished.
Until you're finished, I can keep going.
Well, I can keep going. I got plenty of stuff, but okay, let's do. Let's do negative externalities. External diseconomies. The usual case there is pollution. So here we have supply and demand again, quantity and price. I'll just go another 2 minutes because otherwise those greedy people will beat us to lunch. We don't want those greedy people to beat us. We greedy people want to beat them. Okay, so here's supply and demand, and I'm producing these wristwatches. And in order to produce wristwatches, I have what's behind the supply curve is costs. Okay, fine. And these are only private costs. And what are the private costs? Well, I have to pay my workers. I have to pay the raw materials. I have to pay insurance. I have to pay to buy or rent a factory. I have to buy also machines to make the watches. Those are my private costs. What are the extra external costs? I pollute you. When I produce these watches, out of my smokestacks comes pollution. It gets into your laundry and your lungs, and we don't take that into account. So this is the actual quantity actual. But if we included all the costs, we would have higher costs, and therefore the quantity optimal would be less. And now we've got to move us in that direction. Okay, and now we have a debate between Pagoo, who wants to have taxes, and Coase, who has cockamamie scheme that I don't have time to go into. And we have government, government would just tell people, that hockey stick thing, we're polluting too much, and they would just say, you can only pollute 2/3 of what you're now polluting. Murray Rothbard, in the best article ever written on environmentalism, It's called something Air Pollution. It was 1982 in the Cato Journal. The first half of it is just libertarian law on property and trespass. And the second part, he applies this to the pollution case. And I'll summarize the second part of it. And what Murray says is that in the 1830s and 1840s, what you had was a spate of environmental cases where some little old lady hung out her wash on the line, and it started out wet but clean, came back 2 hours later, dry but dirty. Or you had a railroad setting off sparks to the haystack of the farmer and burning the haystacks because of the sparks go 300 feet. And the plaintiff, the environmental plaintiff, would go to court, and the court would pretty much uphold, not always, based on the evidence. This is not apodictic. This was an empirical examination. Did this guy trespass soot onto your property or onto your lungs or onto your haystacks? Soot or fire or whatever. And this led to several good things. People would use anthracite coal instead of sulfur coal, even though anthracite cost more, because it didn't pollute. And if it polluted, you'd get some plaintiff who would demand damages and an injunction. An injunction is a letter from the court saying, you know, you polluter, cut it out or we'll put you in jail. And damages. So the economy was moved in an environmental direction, a green direction, if you will. And there was even environmental forensics, trying to figure out where did this dust particle come from this factory or that factory. There wasn't much in the 1840s and 50s, but it was something. Now we move to the 1890s, 1900, 1910, and now we have the progressive period. Who was number one then? Great Britain. U.S. wanted to become number one. To become number one, you need battleships, airplanes, tanks, guns, bullets, whatever. So the next time some environmental plaintiff came into court, the court said, yeah, they're violating your property rights, your stinking, lousy, selfish private property rights. There's something more important than your property rights, and that's, drum roll, the public good. And what does the public good consist of? Of letting manufacturers run wild. Because if you want to be number one, you can't take the side of a little old lady against the factory or a railroad, a stupid farmer. And that's why we had pollution problems, and that's why we needed the Clean Air Act. But Murray's point was that if you could sue the environmentalist, the polluter, you wouldn't have this externality. So this is not a market failure, this is a government failure to uphold the law like they did in the 1830s and they didn't in the 1910s. Thanks for your attention.